Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Dig In with Dad. Today we are going to be making something that most people like, bread. Everyone likes bread, and there's nothing like the smell of fresh bread in the morning or anytime really. So I'm going to show you today how you can make some very simple bread. We're going to start with a very basic foundation for everything, and then we're actually going to make it 3 or 4 different ways, and you can kind of pick and choose. So let's get into it. First thing we're going to need, very basic ingredients, 2 cups of warm water. You don't want to get super scalding hot here, otherwise it won't work right. Essentially your yeast will die. That'll be our next ingredient is yeast, and then a little bit of sugar, right? Essentially food for the yeast. So your warm water, when I say warm, I don't know, maybe somewhere around how far back? A few basic ingredients. I'm going to start with warm water, some yeast, and a little bit of sugar. Sugar is just for like yeast food, essentially. Now, when I say warm water, I'm thinking about 100 degrees or so. You can use one of these instant read thermometers, which we've used in the past in some of our other videos, just to make sure if you want. Essentially, if you can put your hand in it and it's pretty comfortable, you're good to go. If it's uncomfortable at all, maybe wait a minute. So 2 cups, and we're going to take about a half a cup of sugar, and we're just going to pour that in. And then we're going to take 2 packs of yeast, or if you buy yeast in bulk like we do, 1 pack is equal to 2 1/4 teaspoons. We're doing 2, so 4 1/2. And your teacher said you'd never use fractions in real life. So we pour our yeast in and just give it a stir. You don't need to go crazy with the stirring. You don't need an immersion blender, anything like that. Just stir it. Okay, and again, it doesn't need to be perfect, right? You just kind of want to get all the yeast wet, right? And the sugar kind of throughout. And that looks like we're pretty good. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to play the waiting game, which is probably the hardest part of this whole recipe. So we're going to give that about 10 minutes or so, and we're going to come back and you're going to see how it's kind of going to get frothy. We'll see in a bit. All right, been about 10 minutes, so we're back. We've kind of risen a lot here. You can see how it's kind of frothed up. Ready for the next step. Dump our frothy mixture straight into your mixer, or just a big mixing bowl if you're using elbow grease. Wonderful. And we're also going to have a little bit of oil. This is just vegetable oil. Trying to slosh it around, get all that good stuff out of the cup. All right, and to that, we now add 6 cups of flour from our never-ending bag of flour. All right, so once we've got our 6 cups of flour in, we're going to use our dough hook attachment. And mix it up. Nice and slow to start. We don't want flour everywhere. So as you kind of keep mixing together here, it's not going to look like much here, and then eventually you'll see it's going to start to kind of come together. Let the mixer do its thing. This may go for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You want it to really be smooth. Pull off the edges of the side of the bowl and really just be a nice cohesive ball of dough. So patience is a virtue once again. Okay, so we're done mixing up, and I should call out now, you'll notice that I'm actually alone in this video. That's because for kids, bread isn't sexy, it isn't fun. Now grown-ups no different, right? Bread is awesome. Can't help but feel that this is a little bit like, what is that? A red hen, right? Who wants to make bread? It's very similar in the house, right? I want to make bread. I ask for help. No one wants to help me. However, once the bread comes out of the oven and now they can smell it, well, now the horde's on the move, right? Now everyone wants some. So we'll see. Anyway, so we're all done mixing. You can let it go a little bit longer if you want in the mixer. That is what you got the mixer for, right? Is to do the actual labor for you. I like to get my hands on it and just knead it a little bit by hand before we finish up with our next step here. So all I'm gonna do is just knead it a little bit on the counter, just for 5, 6, 7 minutes, something like that, right? Nothing crazy. Just to make sure it's kind of the texture and the elasticity and all that kind of stuff that I want it to be. And you'll really notice the difference, right? Sometimes it'll start off pretty shaggy. It doesn't look like it's coming together for much. But once you kind of get your hands on it and get working that dough, it really does come together. It's pretty cool. Okay, all set. Next step is we're just gonna let it rest. To do that, we're gonna start with a big bowl and a little bit of oil. You don't need to measure the oil or anything like that. We're just using the oil to kind of coat the inside, right? So nothing sticks to this bowl. So we're just gonna kind of smear it all around the inside. Very good. Yeah, good. Then we take our dough and I just kind of give it a few tosses, flip and turn around, get all sides covered with the oil. Right? Looking like this. And now we're just going to cover this with saran wrap and put it somewhere warm, out of the way. I put ours on top of the fridge. So do that for maybe 1 to 2 hours. If you can do it for longer, that's great, right? You let a lot more structure build in the bread, but it's not entirely necessary, right? What you're looking for is the dough to at least about double in size, which again, 1 to 2 hours. We'll be back and I'll show you that. All right, it's been a couple hours. We're now into the afternoon, so this bread is going to be fresh for dinner. Let's get into it. So as you can see, we wanted to kind of double in size. I think we did okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this out and we're going to essentially knead the dough a little bit more. It's called punching down the dough. And then we're going to cut it in half, and then I'll show you 2 different ways that we can prepare this, okay? So first, you want to pull from our infinite bag of flour again and just lightly dust your countertop. You don't want it to stick and make a mess. And out you come, and thanks to when we oiled it, nice and easy. Now the bottom's going to be a little bit oily, right, from sitting in the bowl. That's okay. So again, just a couple kneads, push around a little bit, make sure it's nice and soft. It does feel very different from when we first put it in. That's nice. Then I'm just going to cut it in half. This is just a bench scraper or a dough scraper, whatever you want to call it. You can use a knife too. All right. Here's 1/2. Just going to roll that into a little ball, and then we'll save that for later when we go over option 2. Okay. All right. For now, we're going to do option 1, and option 1 is about as easy as it's going to get. It's like a tie with option 3. Okay. So again, a little bit more kneading, nice and soft, nice and smooth. And you're going to kind of want to shape it into kind of a loaf shape, right, as best you can, but it doesn't need to be perfect. Right? Good enough. Now we're going to take our loaf pan, a little bit of cooking spray, make sure you get your sides too. Wonderful. Good. Now, take our little loaf of dough and just put it in. That's it. Now what you can do while you let the oven preheat, while you work on option 2, while you have a drink, whatever you want, just let this rest in the pan, right? It's gonna rise up again, and that's perfect. So we'll just set this guy off to the side, maybe put a tea towel over top of him, and let's get to another option. Okay, let's do option 2. So this is the second half of our little ball of dough there that we just pulled out. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna do, again, a little bit of flour on the countertop. They have an infinite amount, so it's okay. And you're gonna wanna use a bigger area here, right? Flour in more spots, because what we're gonna be doing is we're actually gonna roll this dough out. There we go. Okay, so what you're looking for is, I don't know, let's say 10 by 14-ish, right? A nice big rectangle. I'm not sure that there's a right or a wrong way to do this, right? But again, patience, right? It's okay. You're gonna roll it out a little bit. It's not gonna wanna go. That's okay. Flip it over, roll it again. So we'll roll this out into our rectangle, and then we'll come on back and we'll get to the next step, all right? All right, great. Nice flat piece of dough, basically a rectangle, kind of close. So what we're gonna do with this one is we're gonna put a little flavor into the bread, right? Nice plain white bread is nice. Let's see if we can kind of, I don't know, spice it up a little bit. So, we're gonna start with a little bit of garlic salt, okay? Just sprinkle over the whole thing. You don't have to go nuts. Don't be shy. The oven just ruined surprise number 3 or option number 3. We'll get to it. So next, what we're gonna do is I've taken the seeds out of a jalapeno and diced it pretty fine. Okay? And then we're just gonna put that all over our bread. And you know, as even as you can. Doesn't need to be perfect. Good enough, sure. Next, I've got a kind of a mix. I just bought a pre-done blend of shredded cheddar cheese. And we're gonna put that, you guessed it, all over everything. Now keep it on the bread, not like me. Wonderful, right? We get something that looks like this. Now what we're gonna do is we're going to start from the long edge here that's closest to you, or you can start furthest away, whichever you prefer, just not from the ends. Okay, and we're gonna roll it into one big, huge red bread roll. Okay, so whatever is easiest, I'll do it this way so that you guys can see it coming towards you. Now, right when you get to the end, we're gonna wanna I'm gonna dip my finger in some water here, and we're gonna run it along this edge, right? And that water is gonna help you seal your bread roll. All right. Now what we're gonna do, you could kind of squish this down and put it in a pan, and it's gonna be fine. Let's make it a little bit prettier. we're going to use our scraper again here, or our cutter, knife, whatever you want to use, whatever you've got. And what you're going to do is, let's say, I don't know, a couple inches down from the end, you're going to cut all the way down, but not from end to end, right? Leave this top part still connected. I will tell you, I like things to look pretty decent, sometimes a bit of a perfectionist. This recipe, it gave me some heartburn. I wanted it to be pretty, I wanted it to be perfect while I did it. It's very difficult, and there were lots of colorful language coming out. So I've learned, be flexible. So now you can see, let's take a different look here, and I'll show you what we're gonna do next. Okay, so we've got our two halves here. We're gonna pull them apart and kind of flip them facing up. Much like with all the other components of this recipe, patience is key here. All right, so see, it feels like it's falling apart. That's okay. Pull and squeeze it together a bit as you separate this. All right, now the other side. And who cares if cheese and stuff falls out? We'll sprinkle it on top. We'll call that fancy. Okay, so now we have two separate braids, and all we're going to do is we're just going to kind of crisscross them back and forth. Now you may want to open up this gap that you didn't cut more, if that helps, and we can. We just don't want to separate it all the way, because then it's just, well, it's bread pandemonium. And before we get too carried away, we're going to use our regular loaf pan here, and we're just going to give that a quick spray, because we will not have extra hands when it comes time to put this in the pan. All right, so let's take our first one, and we just go up and over, right? Slowly pull our braids back together again here. Slide this guy over here, bring him back. Now this guy, up and over. It's okay if they fall apart a bit. Okay. Back, up and over, something like that. You're going to twist this, right? Now it kind of looks like we have an open face sandwich. Not bad. Now the fun part is we're going to get this into this. Again, this is where the language comes in sometimes. So I'm going to squish this a little bit, and it might puff up, and that's okay. I may even use this guy to help. Up, kind of get something like this. Now all these little bits here, we'll just clean them up off the counter and just sprinkle them over top, right? Oh, perfect. It's like we meant to do that. If you scrape up a little bit of flour, also not the end of the world. There we go. So now, similar to our first one, the plain loaf that we just put in here, we're just going to throw a tea towel over this, or you don't have to. Again, not the end of the world. We're just going to let it rest while we preheat our oven. So let's do that. All right, let's get to option 3. Option 3 is, again, very simple. So, pretend we're rewinding. Here's our dough that just doubled in size. So what we're going to do is we're going to take from the infinite bag of flour, and we're going to dust our countertop again. Very good. We don't need a big rectangle this time, just a little guy. We turn our dough out. Okay, good. Again, punch it down, give it a little bit of a knead. That's it, we're all done. Now what we're going to do, a little bit of parchment paper here. We're just going to take our dough, just right in the middle of the parchment paper. Okay, that's it. Optional step here is we're going to make a couple cuts in the top of our loaf. Okay, so we have our ball of dough on our parchment paper. We're just going to grab a knife. You can use whatever kind of knife you want. You can just wave it around like this too. Now, the cuts do have a purpose, right? It's so that the bread can expand and steam can release. They're also used for decoration and they look pretty. I'm just going to do a cross, but if you want to get, a little paring knife and you want to do a little design and whatever, you go right to town. And that's it. So now to finish this one off, we're going to use a Dutch oven. Okay. Now we've been preheating ours in the oven at 450. And now you want to give this time to preheat because the actual Dutch oven needs to be good and hot. So let's pull that out now and then we'll finish it up. All right, here's our Dutch oven, and remember, oven mitts because the whole thing is very hot. Okay, and again, very carefully, we're just going to take this parchment paper and put it in the pot. That's it. Done. Parchment paper hangs over the outside. That's okay, doesn't matter. Take our mitts again. Close her up. Back in the oven. Okay, now back to option 1 and 2. Remember, we put them in the loaf pans just to kind of rest a little bit and rise back up. So, a little bit of pizzazz. Ka-chow! We're ready to go. Now they've risen a little bit, and again, it's not going to be mind-blowing, right? If you have a look at our regular loaf, it's still just a little guy in there, but that's okay. And our jalapeno and cheese one, not busting at the seams. But these guys go now in the oven for a little bit, and we'll be back to have a look at all the finished products for our options.
Oh my god, Dad! What you doing?
Making bread. We did a bread-a-palooza. We made regular bread, jalapeno and cheese bread, and then like a Dutch oven bread.
Bread.
What bread?
The crusty bread.
Oh, okay.